When The Lord of the Rings of Power debuted nearly 2 years ago, showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay's prequel series, largely adapted from J.R.R. Tolkien's appendices for his Lord of the Rings novels, appeared poised to expand on the epic world of Middle-earth in ways that even Peter Jackson's wildly successful film adaptations may have missed. To some extent, it succeeded in presenting viewers to younger versions of characters such as Galadriel and Elrond, who were still far from the stately elven lord and lady they would eventually become. Kingdoms that had not yet met sad fates, such as the island of Númenor and the dwarven state of Khazad-dûm, were brought to life in their heyday of glory, even if their eventual doom was carefully prophesied. Bear McCreary's music for the series incorporates many of the strongest themes from Howard Shore's original film soundtracks, creating a sweeping, powerful thread that will definitely continue into the next second season. However, although many of the Rings of Power's best aspects remain prominent in Season 2, so do some of its most serious flaws. This season's big ensemble cast covers even more physical terrain in Middle-earth, but the same cannot be said for the overarching plot, which frequently suffers from uneven pace. Some components, such as Sauron's infiltration of a region, and his cunning manipulation of the elven smith Celebrimbor, are delivered as effectively as possible prior to the unavoidably terrible finale. The deadly peril lurking under the mines of Khazad-dûm proves less frightening than the mounting tensions between Prince Durin and his father, as the latter succumbs to madness after receiving a glittering new ring of power. Outside of tales involving elves or dwarves, Season 2 feels relatively stagnant, with many characters either given little to start with, or pushed over to the larger plot so they can participate in a portion of the main drama. What is Season 2 of The Rings of Power about? At the end of Season 1, we along with Galadriel learn the dreadful truth: her greatest enemy Sauron is also her newest ally Halbrand. It was a predictable twist moving into the second half of the season, but it was nevertheless sad, even armed with this new knowledge. However, Galadriel is hesitant to reveal the scope of Sauron's deception to her other elves. In the meantime, Celebrimbor forges the first 3 Rings of Power for their use, completing them in the final moments of the finale. When Season 2 begins, it is evident that Elrond believes the rings must be destroyed. By then, it's too late. Gil-galad, High King of the Elves, has already agreed to their use, resulting in a breach between Elrond and Galadriel, each adopting a different stance on how to use the ring. Elrond seeks guidance from Círdan, a perfectly cast Ben Daniels, an accomplished shipbuilder and master of the Grey Havens, while Galadriel privately wrestles with the notion that she could have a deeper link to her fiercest nemesis, thanks to the rings. Little does she know that Sauron has already found a way to ingratiate himself with Celebrimbor, now under a different name and guise, with the goal of making even more rings like the ones that came before. Durin is struggling to adjust to his new normal beneath the mountains of Khazad-dûm, after being abandoned by his father, the king. Not only has he been barred from commenting on key issues, but his budget has been slashed, limiting his and his wife Disa's ability to spend as wisely as they once could. Durin's exile from royal duties, however, does not dampen his desire to help his kingdom develop, even if he is growing increasingly skeptical that a fresh gift from the elves may cause more harm than good. Meanwhile, the intrepid Harfoots, Nori Brandyfoot and Poppy Proudfellow, have accompanied their buddy, the Stranger, to the strange realms of Rhûn, in the hopes of assisting him in discovering the entire extent of his wizardly ability, and perhaps revealing his true identity in the process. On the ill-fated island of Númenor, Pharazôn continues his campaign for ultimate authority, hoping to topple Queen Miriel when she returns after lending the kingdom's soldiers to the Southlands. Their political animosity divides even family members, as Elendil and his daughter, Irian, find themselves on opposing sides of the escalating battle while grieving their common loss. Following Orodruin's cataclysmic eruption, the survivors, including Theo and Arondir, travel to Pelargir in search of a new home, but many dangers await them beyond the colony's walls. Season 2 of The Rings of Power prioritizes some characters at the expense of others. If reading through all of that gives you the impression that The Rings of Power Season 2 has a lot of storylines to handle across 8 episodes, all of which were sent for review, you're not alone. In fact, while the scope and grandeur of this series, which to its credit, remains visually amazing, it could not be compacted into a 2 or 3 hour long film. The duration of the season as a whole doesn't always work in the show's favor. The biggest and most regrettable consequence of The Rings of Power's huge ensemble is that some people will eventually draw the short straw, and after 2 seasons, that symptom has grown ever more visible. Some plotlines, such as the aforementioned crafting of the Rings of Power and the capture of a region, which have been frequently addressed in trailers, appear perfectly designed for a season of this length. Sauron as Anatar's slow and sinister deception of Celebrimbor becomes one of the best, if most tragic arcs overall, as Vickers relishes playing a full-throated villain, while Edwards portrays an ill-fated craftsman whose vanity and ambition get the best of him. Characters such as Galadriel and Elrond are also better defined by elements of conflict, self-doubt, and a lot more opportunities for action. As their opposing views on what to do with the Rings of Power put their long-standing friendship to the test, and Clark and Aramayo deliver their best performances in the series so far. In contrast, other characters appear to be moving in slow motion, holding in place for as long as the tale requires them to, while those at the center of larger conflicts push forward. As the Harfoots and Stranger travel across Run, the plot becomes as slow and tortuous as the desert itself. Even the long-awaited addition of a fan-favorite character from Tolkien's legendarium, Tom Bombadil, fails to inject the right amount of whimsy, and Kinnear's performance overall feels almost a little too restrained in terms of eccentricity, though he does make an effective foil to Wayman's stoic stranger in more than one episode. Veteran actor Ciarán Hinds, who plays an unknown dark wizard, has intriguing potential as a terrible antagonist, but the season does not give him enough opportunities to establish himself as a legitimate threat. Season 2 of The Rings of Power shines the brightest through Middle-earth's darkness. One of The Rings of Power Season 1's most pervasive themes were around the looming darkness that threatened our heroes. And Season 2 wastes no time in announcing that the darkness has come. Nowhere is this more evident than in its opening sequence, which serves as a sort of prologue, introducing us to Sauron in his previous incarnation, and playing out the timeline of events that concludes with his new Halbrand persona landing on the same raft as Galadriel in Season 1. Not only does this demonstrate how deeply ingrained Sauron's wickedness is, but it also hints at the full depth of his power, as well as the terrible potential that even something seemingly insignificant like death may not be enough to permanently eliminate.